We've got I'm not sure whether it's a full agenda or or what kind of an agenda it is, but we've got 3 items: 0 North Mountain Drive, 25 Osceola, and then 197 Clinton Avenue. Why don't we first go to 0 North Mountain Drive? And this is a continuation of a meeting for the minimum net lot area in this zone is to develop a lot is 20,000 square feet. The proposed net lot calculated using the reductions for steep slopes is 15,240.9 square feet and is thus deficient by 4,759.1 square feet. And who will be heard in this application?
Good evening, Chairman Hoffman and members of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Representing Sonia Giglio, along with me is Patty Steinschneider. Thank you. We are both going to be presenting information to you. Just initially, thank you for the opening. We are here really for 2 variance/interpretation requests.
Why don't we handle the first one first?
Great. So just for a brief history, we were back in front of you.
Very brief.
Give me 30 seconds.
Yep.
6 months ago, you asked us essentially to go through the sausage-making process, if you will, at the planning board. Get site plan approval, or just about site plan approval. Answer the question of whether this house can fit on this site. And we're back here. I'm happy to report back that essentially the shoe fits. We've gone through over several iterations with the planning and with the village planner and the village engineer, stormwater calculations. The zoning board had mentioned 5 or 6 items: stormwater, site distance, slope issues that you wanted us to focus on at the planning board. We've answered all those questions to the planning board's satisfaction. So now we're back here. I believe you have a favorable recommendation from the planning board for that first variance request. So we're here, and I certainly don't need to prolong this, but don't need to go into the interpretation question. If the zoning board believes we have met the 5-part balancing test for the building lot area variance. So to take Chairman Hoffman's lead, I do think that this is a good approach to kind of bifurcate the 2 issues. Let's deal with the first variance that you've heard about before, and then we can address the lot coverage variance next. But if we don't get over this hurdle, we're stuck. So I'm happy to review what I've submitted in my letter back 5 or 6 months ago, and that's still pending before you. You're well versed in the area variance criteria. Essentially, the planning board went through the criteria in a lot of ways in terms of environmental impact, character community, whether essentially can this site fit this house? And for
Just correction. Can this site fit a house?
Can the site handle a house?
Yes.
And we actually went through the detail, we really went through the sausage-making process and said, okay, here is the house we would like. And as you see in the resolution from the planning board, they're comfortable that this 0 North Mountain Drive can fit this house. And that this lot
Fit a house.
well, can fit a house, but they went through the details of this particular site plan. But whether you want to say a house, yes.
Excuse me, though, that's not what the resolution says from the planning board. It says a house. It doesn't, they didn't approve it with this house.
Okay, I haven't seen the actual resolution, but
Yeah, it says the planning board has reviewed the proposed site plan and finds by a vote of 5-0 that the property is developable and the lot would be able to support a single-family home. It doesn't say this single-family home. And then there's a subsequent discussion about the home.
so, well, there's a subsequent discussion about lot coverage, I guess, and the size of the home. But
Correct.
for all intents and purposes, so the planning board's exercise was focused on a site plan. Stormwater calculations were done on a particular site plan. Retaining walls were proposed for a particular site plan. So in terms of how you want to word it, I will then restate what I started with, is that a shoe fits on this. We came back, we did our homework, and a shoe fits on this site. So,
A single-family shoe.
Right.
Yeah.
and that's all we were ever proposing, yes. So if you have specific questions as to how we meet any of the criteria for the area variance for this lot to be a building lot or a buildable lot because of the steep slope calculations, again, we have about 23,000 square feet. When you take away the steep slopes, it's about 15,750 square feet. So we do need a variance for that, but the property itself, the gross area is above the 20,000 minimum. So we're dealing with a substantially oversized lot.
I do have one question. I mean,
Sure.
Let me preface it by saying I support the planning board's conclusion. I just wanted to know a little bit about one of the ways you and they got to that conclusion. And the question is, I know people who live on Lafergie. I know people whose houses on Lafergie have been severely damaged by floodwaters. I know the issue related to that is the steep slope coming down on the side that faces the streets from Lafergie, from where North Mountain Drive is. I know that the
You mean
village.
Osceola.
Osceola's.
Yeah.
I know the village has said to the homeowners on Lafergie that the stormwater piping that runs in that area is not sufficiently large to handle the flow of water. I hope that during the discussions you had with the planning board, those statement of facts were addressed, and I'm just interested in knowing what the solution was to prevent the folks who live on the side of Lafergie that is, I guess, closer to Ashford from being flooded, or on Lafergie from getting flooded. Is there an increase in pipe size? Are there additional storm drains being added? How is the village, or is your development protecting the homeowners who have been traditionally flooded when you're adding another house and taking away permeable land and adding impermeable land?
Sure, and I understand that flooding is a significant concern in this area and certainly throughout the village. We have met the criteria that there is no net increase in stormwater runoff. That is the state criteria. So for our proposed site plan on this property, through a series of, Patty will correct me if I'm wrong, but detention and retention infrastructure placed on the property, we are improving the stormwater capacity on the site. And I would suggest, as I did in front of the planning board, and I think this is where the planning board came out too, is that we're improving this particular site. Obviously aren't able to deal with the surrounding properties and what impact they may be having on the flooding. But in terms of this 0 North Mountain Drive, we have met the current DEC and village code requirements for stormwater runoff.
Thank you.
So,
And wasn't the comment made that if the village doesn't put curbing in to retain water, that the applicant would do that?
yes, we would agree to that condition that was brought up.
Because the curbing is inconsistent on that road.
Absolutely.
But it's absent in that area, right below this piece of property.
Correct. That came up last Thursday as well, and we will agree to that.
Is there an assumption built into saying that there's no net increase in water runoff? Is the assumption that whatever property is put there has to install dry wells or some system
water retention.
that will retain water, that will make it a net? In other words, if you just built without concern about that, it seems like there would be a problem.
Well-
Am I understanding that right? That
We are
built into
required,
your conclusion, and I guess your engineer's conclusion that it'll work, is a fairly aggressive system.
I think Patty's will go through the details, but it is not just our engineer's conclusion, but it also is the village engineer's conclusion as well. There's a series of pretty in-depth calculations in terms of where the infrastructure is placed, how much water in a different storm year, in a different year storm event. And without further ado, I think Patty might be able to answer some of those more detailed questions.
And I am going to try and be quick. I'm going to try also not to editorialize, but it's hard for me at times, so I apologize if I do it. When you say a house, I understand the point, but what we did after we came here and then went back is we actually made a full application and went through the whole thing. So we've had the engineers do all that work. Here is the survey of the property. You've seen that before. Here's the plat map that was filed with the county in December 1989, with all of its notes that pertain to that.
You know, we did 1989 back in 2022, Pat.
I'm just saying that what you're consistent with what they said their concerns were, because they actually put on the plat map that this property, any development of this property, has to accommodate all stormwater on site, not some of it, not a percentage of it, all. So what we got when we went back to the planning board was the comments that this board put forward, which really identified water, safety, rock removal, and the size of the house and how it's going to relate to the site. What we did then is we broke that into a series of things that we went into deep investigation, brought in engineers to work on all of it. We broke those down into stormwater management, vehicular safety, rock removal, the size of the house, site stability, landscaping, and then at the very end, we ended up adding contextual compatibility because there was some concern with how would this house fit in with its neighbors, which of course is important to the planning board, I believe also important to this board. One of the things that we think, you know, as I understand the second issue, and I'm not going to talk about it, but we did design it to be 40% compliant 40% of gross lot area for the coverage, impervious, and 18% for the building coverage of the gross lot area. So that'll be a different discussion. This is the drawing that we produced that was done by Hudson Engineering that actually shows the answer to your question. Mr. Gutman, the Coltech units are actually sized out, the location, their placement on the site, everything that has to do with solving the water for full retention on site, not an overflow situation, not doing a percentage of it, which is actually the standard. You figure out how much more. This holds all the water that we're taking on site that's falling on impervious surfaces that we have and controlling that on site. We actually, one other thing I'll just say quickly is Hudson Engineering did their whole study on the assumption that all of the surface area we were creating was impervious. We actually designed all of the paving on site so that it is fully pervious, not just one of these things where water can get between the two rocks, but actually there's a real space. And then we put additional gravel below that so we can hold all the water that falls on the terrace on site without depending upon the system that the engineers have designed to lose that water. So we have a factor of safety of like 30 or 40%. We then took a look at the concerns, comments that were mentioned, and realized that, well, we're capturing all the water that falls on ours, and one of the concerns expressed was, well, the water right now is shedding down the site. There is no curb, jumping the curb, and it's going across the street and running down the hill. So what we did is we actually created a swale along the street and a drainage basin that's a backup system. So if any water gets around something, we're still controlling it on site. And that basin is fully on the property. The stormwater management design was based on a full stormwater management plan and drainage analysis prepared by Hudson Engineering. They actually did the perk tests. They did the deep hole test. They found the areas where these Coltech units could be placed. So they did a full design. It's not hypothetical. This is something that this should be considered what you'd have as completion for your project. So the important thing in the report, stormwater management report, is that the system is designed to fully accept, no release, the entire stormwater runoff volume for the 100-year storm event from the watershed and exfiltrate the runoff into the surrounding soil. So that's the definitive statement made by the engineer. Concern with rock removal. This board mentioned that. We were aware of a property in town where they've been removing rock for 10 years or something. It's crazy. So what we did is we took a look at what the actual capacities, quantities, what the process would be for rock removal. We went into a full analysis of that, and Hudson's role in that was to confirm our quantities and the details on that, as well as to put together a fairly sophisticated erosion sediment control plan, so that during construction, if we have water running on site and things, we're not in construction adversely affecting neighbors. So it's something that is from the start of the project going forward, it's all going to be dealt with. We prepared a report on the excavation and mechanical removal, calculating the number of trucks, frequency of the trucks, size of the trucks, size of the equipment, how it be handled. And we had that reviewed by our structural engineer, Cyrus Mandwobi, who attested that all of the numbers that were in there were accurate and reasonable for expectations of what this would really entail. Another concern that was expressed at the planning board, which I think was one that you actually mentioned at one point, is the extent of landscaping. This is a rocky site. Can it accommodate robust landscaping? And it can. We've actually had the landscape architect, Susan Janchil, do a full landscaping plan for this project, including screening for all the retaining walls and anything else that we're proposing to build. So that's been prepared. Vehicular safety came up. This is a driveway, if you will, to the country club. There's significant traffic that uses that road. We're proposing a driveway that's going to come onto that. Is it safe? You have visibility in both directions. So we designed the driveway. We have pitches on the driveway that meet all acceptable standards. Actually, we took photographs with the tape. So we've determined that we have 180 feet, more than 180 feet in both directions, which would accommodate cars going at 45 miles an hour without any question, still be safe. I think anybody who's driven up there knows that people should not be driving more than 45 miles an hour up there. I think 25 is the posted limit. And again, this was reviewed by Cyrus Mandwomi and determined to be all consistent with all engineering requirements. The size of the house and the context compatibility. We did 2 reports on that. One, analyzing the building and impervious coverage calculations, which I think will be a comment for the second part of this. And the other is the context limit area and how we compare to neighbors. And we determined that the 11 parcels that we evaluated, 6 of them, the houses were larger, 4 of them, the lots were smaller. That's out of 11. We're kind of in the middle in all of that, which I think means that we're in a reasonable position with the context of the neighborhood. We actually did get a letter from one of the neighbors expressing a concern and voicing a positive that this house will fit in well with the character of the houses in that neighborhood, which is an unusual character. And usually we're talking about houses that are going to look too big. The fear there was the house was not going to look like it really fit. In other words, not big enough. I think we've got it working fine. The only point I'm going to make on the
And we got 2 letters delivered to us, one from the O'Connors and one from Josh Weiss and his wife that were favorable to the application.
We also, at the last meeting, when we talked about, we've had our engineer do all this stuff. It's been reviewed by the village's engineer. The neighbors also hired an engineer. I don't know if he's on tonight, but he appeared at the planning board and he gave a fairly positive reaction to everything that we're doing. The only thing I'm going to say about the coverage calculations is I've been doing work in Dobbs Ferry since the late 70s. Since the steep slopes ordinance was adopted, all the projects we've done, except those involving the subdivision at the same time, both the site coverage, impervious coverage, and building coverage were based on the gross lot area, not the net. Christina Griffin was here the other night when we made the presentation. She sent me a list of the 8 projects that she's done the last couple of years, which similarly used the gross lot area. So I don't know if that factors into anything, and I don't think you want me to waste your time showing you the pictures? Okay, just checking. They're nice pictures, beautiful houses.
We've had a long time to learn about this.
Yeah, so they're all great. And then the pictures that we've developed of the house that we're proposing and how it sits into the site. I think it's a house that looks appropriate, fits the site really well. and I think it would be a positive addition for the community.
Okay, is there anyone else who'd like to be heard on this application? Sarah, anyone else from Zoom land? Okay, why don't you put them forward?
Hi, good evening. I'm Jim Anacarico with Cronin Engineering. I was retained by some of the neighbors to follow along with the project from the very beginning. Turned into just mainly just looking at stormwater, negative impacts, possible negative impacts regarding stormwater to some of the downstream neighbors, particularly the Valvanos at 8 Osceola. Was happy to report back to them that the planning board and your village consulting engineer, really held their feet to the fire when it came to the design of the stormwater system. And then last week I submitted a letter really with our only gripe regarding what you already mentioned regarding the curb on the west side of North Mountain Drive, which, there's a section of it missing. Who knows, maybe snowplow years ago, or maybe it was just never there. But that section is directly across from the driveway where the trench drain is. And although I totally agree with Pat about everything he's mentioned about the stormwater and its design and how much it can hold. Anything can happen if there's ever a clog or something. That trench drain would be the overflow point for the system, and we just feel that it would, continue. It would add to the water that's already shedding in that direction to where the curb is missing, and then eventually getting down to the Valvano property. So our only request was that somebody, whether it be the applicant or the village itself, fill in that gap of the curb, and that would really take care of the situation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Time.
Guys?
So do you want to vote on the First Amendment first and then discuss the second? Is that the plan?
Yes.
So motion to close?
Motion to close the hearing? Second. All in favor?
Motion to approve the variance as worked out between the applicant and the planning board, and as recorded in these documents.
For the net lot area
For net lot area.
of deficiency of 4,759 square feet, which will enable you to build a house on this property. Pat, one thing I was.
I think we need to vote.
We're second first. I'll second it.
Okay.
And now we vote. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Pat, when we worked on the country clubhouse, we had the vehicle people, the trucks, coordinate with the neighbors. There's a bus stop where Osceola meets the seventh hole. You or someone should be talking with those mothers so that you know what time the buses are there, both, going and coming, so that you're not running trucks down there then, and if you have to, have some extra people around for safety.
Absolutely. What we've done in the past, and this building department is very good at this, is we've actually blocked out times during the day when deliveries should not be made, pickups should not be made, so we don't have trucks coming during those times. It's usually coinciding with when kids are being picked up for school, when they're getting, dropped off after school. And we've never really had a problem making that happen. Sometimes an errant truck driver will come through, but we'll actually, you know.
The other issue is not having a truck that's blocking the road in commuter time, especially in the morning, so that people can get out.
Yeah.
That's the only way they'll
Well,
get frazzled.
as I say in one of the, I don't know, I wrote so many reports on this, I don't remember which one says what, but one of them, we've also said, we're gonna set it up so that we're not using the street as a parking lot for the construction. It's just too narrow a street to do that. We do have a nice area for parking on site, so we'll develop that first so that we've got a good place for trucks, deliveries, and everything else, so trucks will come off the street when they're making deliveries.
Moving on to the second variance slash interpretation request.
Before you really get started, we know your application came in and was sent around to the neighbors well. It did not get published, as it should have. I'm not sure that it came in after the date, but it didn't get published. I'm not sure that's really a problem in this situation, because unless my board members disagree with me, our standard operating procedure is projects that go through the planning board should be done without variances. So they don't come to us to ask for something more. We get involved when people want to put additions on their house, the house is poorly located, there's already an existing nonconformity, or something like that. But, this is an application where you've got, a clean slate. You can build whatever you want, that is consistent with the code. And the code is a net number. And so I would use your energy along those lines.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, and maybe this question is for Dan Posen, is there a jurisdictional issue with it not being published? I know you started off saying it wasn't published, but that's maybe not an issue for tonight. But
Well, because you'd be asking for something that we don't think you should be asking for.
well, okay, so if I can back up for a second, our request is kind of a hybrid request. It's for a variance. We're happy to go down the variance route and seek that relief. We're entitled to ask for it. Or alternatively, it would be to appeal the building inspector's determination as to his determination that lot coverage is based on the net lot area, not gross lot area. So again, as I started the initial variance request application, I don't need to go down the interpretation road, if you will, if this board is willing to consider whether we meet the criteria for a variance request. If you're telling me, and at least I've heard from you, Chairman, that you don't believe we're entitled to this type of variance request, then I will start with the interpretation, the appeal of the building inspector's interpretation.
I don't believe that was noticed at all.
So
Is
that was in
is that
our
misrepresented?
application, so that was part of our application. So I guess I'm a little confused as to whether,
That part we can't hear.
because it was not
Because that was not
noticed.
noticed.
Your choice to hear or not, obviously, your call 100%. I would be apprehensive about having a decision made tonight, because then it could be subject to an Article 78 from somebody saying.
So we're not deciding anything,
Okay. Well, I think that's the other.
except for what you already have.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand how it didn't, I know it was in the paper, so I don't know if it was in the enterprise, how it wasn't noticed.
Gee, Pat, I didn't see it in the enterprise.
It was in 2 Fridays ago, I think.
Oh,
For the zoning.
But isn't there there's an amended application, though?
Maybe they published it because of the public hearing for the planning board, and they didn't mention for zoning board. I know it was in the paper, but.
we just have the other two applications in the enterprise.
That was the meeting at the planning board was a public hearing, so that, I'm sure, had to be
that had to be noticed.
Published, noticed.
Right.
Maybe that's what that was.
Yeah, I mean, a full separate application was made for this and required time in advance of the meeting. It was actually submitted before we submitted for the planning board. I'm not sure
Right.
why it wouldn't have been noticed.
I don't know what the date of the publication requirement is, but it was not published.
So, I mean, we're here this evening. I understand that, I agree with Patty, we wouldn't want a decision to be made if it wasn't published. That is for lack of a better term, a jurisdictional defect. But since we are here this evening, can we present, I mean, we've been going back and forth between the boards for a really long time. And it became known to us, I believe, in late February, that lot coverage was now going to be based on net lot area, not gross. So we're here,
Well, you knew that in the initial application. You know, the steep slopes reduces the size of this lot from a gross coverage to a net coverage. And so net numbers are used in the application because they are reduced by the steep slope.
not for lot cover, the lot coverage definitions in the code don't,
The definition says, for impervious coverage, it says, of the gross lot area. For the building coverage, does not say gross, it does not say net.
Right,
But
it
it
says
says
lot
lot, and then it
coverage.
defines lot area, which is not one that has any coverage on it. Then it defines net lot area, which
Well, I would file an application to argue this point.
we did.
we did. That's why we're here tonight. That's why the planning board on Thursday night modified the resolution to you to address this second variance request, and we had already anticipated the need to appeal the interpretation, so we filed that 2.5 or 3 weeks ago. Thank you.
22nd of
For-
March?
for-
Is that what you said?
To build a home. That's what.
For the zoning board.
For the zoning board.
Right, the notice that was circulated to the neighbors doesn't say anything specific other than to build a home at Zero
Right.
North Mountain. Doesn't say what the
Well, we don't
variances
write
are.
we don't do the publication, so I.
No, I'm looking at your
affidavit.
affidavit, your stuff, your documents. I think you handed an affidavit of service, right?
Right.
Yeah. And you notified the neighbors, I guess, I don't know if it was by mail or by hand, what, yeah.
Well, by mailing, certified
Yeah,
mailing, and
yeah.
we use the form that the village provides for it, which is kind of one that's different than what I used to do. It doesn't go into any detail. This is not allowed to. When I would add detail on a letter explaining it, I was told by the then building inspector, not now. If I did it again, I wouldn't be on the agenda. So we don't provide that kind of explanation. This was not permitted.
Interesting. I've never heard of that, but I don't sit with the zoning board,
We
so.
should sit and.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're wrong, I just not
So,
heard of that.
I mean, our submission was, again, for lack of a better word, a hybrid to, like, in the alternative, if we weren't going to get an area variance for lot coverage, we are seeking an appeal of the building inspector's interpretation. As you know, you're the appellate body in that instance. So, again, I mean, we submitted our arguments, we submitted our PowerPoint presentations. I'm happy to go through them as to why we believe that lot coverage for the last 30 years was based on gross. There's been no change to these definitions in the village code. I know there's been different amendments throughout the code over the years, but these definitions haven't changed. So, with all due respect, we only became aware via a memo from the village planner, I think it was at the end of February,
February 28th.
that we now needed a variance because the lot coverage was not going to be based on the gross lot area, but on the net, which
That was
is,
the fifth notice, memo we got from the village, consultant planner. That was the first time that this was raised.
It would seem to me that the question hinges on the definition of whether it's based on net or gross lot coverage.
Correct.
And it would seem to me that it would be unfair to ask our village attorney to make that research and make that recommendation to the board at a meeting. And I personally would think it might be in everybody's best interest if we give Dan the opportunity to do the research he needs to do to make a informed decision that we can use to guide our decision, and give you the opportunity to make sure everything is noticed properly so that there won't be any issue of standing or Article 78 on the procedural issue.
I believe Mr. Posen, we've talked, he has our submissions, he has our arguments. I don't know, I'm aware that he's reviewed them. I'm not going to put him on the spot. But I mean, right now, I mean, we believe we're fully submitted. We fully briefed the issue. We're here to answer questions the board may have, or, any consultants that the board may have.
Was our
well-
submission shared with the zoning?
What's that?
Was our submission
Yeah.
shared? So all of the, it sounds like, we went into great detail about the whole history on this and everything else. And it doesn't sound like that's been really reviewed.
Well, could we ask Mr. Romer if he would like an opportunity to, present the basis for the decision? And I'm not putting you on the spot unless you're comfortable.
I think it's pretty simple. It says like, in our definitions for lot area, gross, the total square footage of lot prior to any reductions pursuant to this chapter.
So what are you reading from when you say that?
That's from our definitions from 300-14 in the zoning chapter.
Zoning code.
And after you do those reductions, then that would reduce the size of the building code.
Right. And Mr. Steinschneider, in some of your submissions where you go through the different properties, some are reduced, some are not reduced.
Only two were reduced. Those both involved subdivisions, which was why net was created.
So net is okay in a subdivision, but it's not okay elsewhere. Is that what
So
you're
what
saying?
happened-
Where does that say, where does that say that in the code?
It doesn't go into great detail on it, but the history is very clear in the minutes of the meetings back in 1989. I know we don't want to talk about then, but in the late 80s, there was concern about cluster subdivisions that were coming forward. And the issue was how many units you got, and the number of units was determined by yield from a hypothetical subdivision. The village decided to do, Kevin Plunkett was the attorney at the time, was to come up with a way of reducing how many lots you could fit. So they came up with steep slopes being a deduction. It's not a bad idea, it makes sense. And what they then did is they subjected anybody coming forward proposing a cluster subdivision that they would have to show the hypothetical, and that would give them the count. One of the reasons I'm so familiar with this is at the same meeting that this project was approved as a building lot at October 1989 was the same meeting that I was at next on the agenda for Livingston Ridge. We had already gotten Livingston Ridge approved. We were told that because we had 2 years since the approval, we hadn't started construction, we were subject to the steep slopes ordinance that had just been adopted. We went through the process. What we did is we had to calculate all the numbers and determine how that affected the number of units that we could have. We had proposed 22. We went through the whole thing. That's why we amended our application to change the number to 24, because that's what the code called for. We then went back and we designed the project with gross lot area for the buildings, gross lot area for the impervious. It was explained at the time that that was not intended to affect anything to do with the house. If you think about ramifications of what this interpretation is, with anybody who say has a 5,000, 6,000 square foot lot that they've built on, if they have steep slopes, they're going to, anybody with that situation is going to need to come for a variance. That's not the intent of the zoning ordinance, to make everybody non-conforming. Dobbs Ferry is a hilly place. There are lots of houses that were built. The 30 houses or so that we've done since then, or since 1989, has all have used base, except for the ones that were in the subdivision, which I think was just Tony Giuliano's on Briery. I forget what the second one was, but those two included it because we had to do subdivision at the same time. But everything else was that when Christina Griffin heard this conversation last Thursday, she provided a list of the projects that she's done in the last several years that all use the gross lot area for building coverage. Wasn't oversight.
Some of those projects didn't have to use a reduction because there was no steep slope or
Right.
oversized lot, so it went with the gross lot area. That's when you would use the gross.
That's fine,
And
but
if there's a deduction, then you would go with the net.
that might be an interpretation of some sort, but we had to do that calculation for every project. So it's not like sometimes they did it and sometimes it didn't. We had to show that we had to show.
If there was
our
no
areas.
steep slope and there was no oversized lots, you didn't do any deductions. You went with the gross lot area.
And if there were, and many of them had steep slopes and would have not been building lots under this code without a variance if we had to count those as the net.
Or possibly a waiver at that time from the planning board.
If they wanted to do that, but it never came up because it wasn't an issue, because we were allowed to use the gross lot area.
I see it different, I see it as the.
I understand, and I don't mean disrespect to you, because I know how hard you're working to have it make sense. I think you and I have had conversations about some of the things in here don't quite close sometimes, and I think this might be one of them.
So Patty, are you suggesting that in the definitions of lot area gross and lot area net, those only apply to subdivisions?
The only time that you're subtracting property is when you're going for a subdivision. If you're doing impervious site calculations, you use gross. It says so.
Well, no, but both of those definitions refer to reductions pursuant to this chapter. It doesn't say for subdivisions, it
It
says,
defines gross lot area.
I'm looking right at it, I know.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
So now look at the definition for impervious coverage.
These are gross.
It refers to the gross lot area. That's the definition.
Regardless of whether it's gross or net, it's still, you're still requesting a variance, 27% versus like 14%, if I understand your documentation.
I'm not
If you
sure.
use the gross use the gross area, you still need a variance of,
I think only now for the building, because I do believe that the building department may have changed its position on impervious surface, given the fact that it's very clear that it's based on the gross lot area.
So to answer your question, if there is.
I understand that. I understand there's debate. I'm just saying, let's say the settlement of
You
the
wouldn't-
debate
you would be-
is that the calculation is based on gross instead of net. If it's based on gross, which is
You
what
don't
you
need a
want,
variance.
you still need a variance?
No, that's
So
why
did
at
the
the
planning
end,
board recommend to us by a vote of 4-1 not to approve this
That's
variance?
kind of where my head's at.
Because there is always a fear of, there's a term that's used often in this world of it's too big. And I've heard that apply to 1,800 square foot houses, I've heard it apply to 10,000 square foot houses. There's a concern with change, there's a concern with projects that are being built. Lots of people talk about things being too big. Too big for what? This board has conducted a very intelligent response in analyzing this, which is to ask the planning board how it sees this in terms of those issues. And those issues are all based on the real kinds of things that matter. How you're dealing with stormwater, how you're dealing with rock removal, all of those kinds of things. As Mr. Lane said, who's on the planning board, he was comfortable with this before, and he didn't really have any reason to change once these numbers came up. He was one of the for them.
I have a problem saying that I'm going to accept the planning board recommendation in the first instance and not accept the planning board's recommendation in the second instance. So essentially, I'm saying that if I have granted power that we could hold to another body, and they've done several months of extensive work on the issue, why would I accept, from my perspective, why would I accept one and not the other?
I
Oh,
think
so-
it's a Solomon issue.
Right.
I would suggest that, we are here, again, because of a change in an interpretation of lot coverage. But the four of you are well-versed in the criteria that you are required to apply. The planning board has different jurisdiction. They were not as comfortable with the size of the home. But the question for this board is, if you're looking only at the variance request now, have we met the statutory criteria? And even if you accept the building inspector's interpretation as accurate and that should stand, is in the context of this neighborhood. We don't need side yard variances. We don't need a height variance. This house, does it fit in the neighborhood? Are there negative environmental impacts? Are there aesthetic impacts? Is the variance substantial? Not just in terms of percentage, because it would be zero if the interpretation was different, we wouldn't be here. But is it substantial in the context of the neighborhood? If Patty went through the houses that are there now, he has a great aerial from a drone of the house and what it could look like. It fits right in. So notwithstanding, and I respect that you work well with the planning board, but you do have separate jurisdiction, and you are required, you're almost hamstrung, if you will, by the variance criteria. And so if you have questions of how we meet one of those statutory criteria, I think we can provide answers. But that is, I mean, there are 3 neighbors that were comfortable and wanted this project to go forward. The one neighbor that sent in a letter of concern dealt with stormwater. I leave that to the engineers, and they seem to have been happy and satisfied with those calculations.
But you can't make a decision tonight anyway.
Right.
So are there, if this variance, if you will, I guess the public hearing isn't technically opened, but are there any other questions that at least the 4 of you have or staff, either regarding the area variance criteria, because again, that is a road we're happy to go down if this board is considering the variance. If not, we will pursue the appeal of the interpretation. But if you have questions, we'd like to be able to come back at the next meeting and have answers for you.
Well, I have a question. I mean, and I guess I'll say I essentially am not troubled by the size of the building as conceptually. But I think in terms of going through the 5 factors, one of them is how substantial is the variance. So I do think it would help me at least to decide which, if we're talking about a variance from the net number. And so I guess my question that I don't think you've addressed is I mean, you're basing your argument on plain meaning, but I think we have to look at the plain meaning in the context of the whole zoning code, which includes the part that comes right before that talks about impervious situations where the lot, where there's a deduction. So I mean, I guess I'm keeping an open mind about this, but I haven't heard a rationale for only looking at the part that you focused on in your letter without looking at it in the context of what comes immediately before that. So that would be helpful to me if it was sort of a little effort to address that.
I will watch this
Well, give me another 20 minutes. I'll get the words correct.
No, it's good. No, you're clear. I'm just not receiving well. I mean, I think we should end this because I think you're going to want to have it fresh and have the information that you've asked us for with it properly noticed so we can do this at the next meeting. I'm very uncomfortable discussing if we're not properly noticed because it can be misconstrued that we. As the chair knows, sometimes people think that I've gotten to do things that I shouldn't get to do, but I'm very careful not to. The only point I want to make to this is when we look at the size of the house, The house is less than 2,800 square feet on the first floor. So the actual, 4,200 square feet is 15% of the 23,337 square feet left on the lot. What makes it be bigger than that is the garage, porches, large sloping roofs that come down to the first floor level, all of which, well, no, these things factor into one of your big concerns. One of the members of the planning board said, if you can build a 2,800 square foot footprint, you can build a 5,600 square foot house. What are you complaining about? Well, I think that would be a really wrong house on that lot. Really wrong given that neighborhood. It would be a great big box of a house. It wouldn't follow the character of the really neat houses that are all around that, which have these long sloping roofs that come down and bring it down to a first floor level. I think that's very important for the character of the house that fits this neighborhood. So somehow, if we've had to provide porches to make this bigger, as a building coverage, I think there's a really good reason for it, not just because somebody wants something bigger. The house is not unusually large.
Pat, just to go back to how the planning board saw things.
Right.
And based on your submission, I kind of agree with them. While there are, I think, 11 houses in this neighborhood, some of which have very large lots, some of which have smaller lots. Some of the smaller lots are the two neighboring houses across the street.
Right.
One of which is 2,800 square feet, and the other one is 4,100 square feet. Now, you're asking for 4,900 plus square feet, which is significantly larger.
But our lot is also larger than those other lots.
Not on a net basis.
Actually,
Excuse me, you're correct. You're correct.
And
Because these are all gross numbers.
Right, and that might be helpful to show what the nets are of those.
But it's not, it doesn't have that much more square footage.
Well, 41 to 49 is, I'd say, within the same neighborhood. And if the lot is.
Then 49 could go to 41 and basically be the same? Is that what you're saying?
Well, if their lot is like, a little bit, is less than a half acre. I think it's 0.4 something, and ours is more than a half acre. It might be.
62 is 20,000 square feet, and 65 is 17,000 square feet.
Right.
And you're at 23 gross.
Right, so we're 5,000 square feet more. So if you start doing a proportioning, that 4,100 with that, sounds like it's within striking distance. And of course, you're absolutely right. I mean, the house above, I went very quickly through the photographs of the houses. One of the ones I enjoyed presenting the most was one where you could show a picture of the house, and then you can show another picture of the house, and either one of those two houses would be a generous house, and you realize it's the same house. It's very large. It's a house that's, it's also one of the most wonderful houses in South Shore. It's a fabulous designed house.
Yes, but it's got 65,000 or 80,000 square feet.
Exactly. So what would be interesting is to look at those ratios and see how they relate.
Well, it's not, wasn't interesting enough for you to present them.
Well, I thought it would be obnoxious, I'm sorry. It's,
but Pat, you're supposed to be making a case. We're not supposed to be making the case for you.
Of course not. And the case we've made is what we used for those numbers. We didn't get involved we only worked off of what the town of Greenberg provided. We didn't want to start getting involved in, well, we went and looked at this house in more detail or something, that would be inappropriate. And we can take another look at what the actual numbers, how they really do relate. Because if I've got an 80,000 square foot lot with a, say, 10 or 12,000 square foot house, I might actually be not that different from a 4,900 square foot house on a 23,000, a bigger than half acre. Maybe the math doesn't support that, but I'm not doing the math right now, so we'll see how that comes out. The point is that one of the comments, one of the letters we got, kind of revealed that their concern had been that we were going to do a house that would be okay for most other neighborhoods in Dobbs Ferry, but not fit this neighborhood. This house fits this neighborhood really, really well. It enhances the values of all the houses around it. It is a positive contribution to the community, not just in the fact that it's solving problems that the village doesn't have the resources right now to solve, but we can, but also it really fits in well with the neighboring houses, and it would be a kind of house that you'd say, what are the impacts on the house above? What are the impact on the houses across the street? We can get an appraiser to give us an answer on that. I think he's gonna say it significantly increases their value. Which is part of your concern. The zoning board is very concerned with anybody that would
Well-
do something that would be injurious to the value of neighboring property.
Right, right. So you will see us next time
I'll try.
with an application, and you should make it very complete to tell us all the reasons why you think
Yeah,
that gross should be used,
if I
not
felt-
net, because it seems to me, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me that when you have a steep slope property, you're going, yeah, and you reduce it, you're reducing it for a reason.
we might have to bring in testimony from people who were involved in that decision-making.
Then,
That would be
then bring them next time and, or have them submit testimony in writing.
That might be a
We'd
lot
like to
easier.
see whatever we can, and we will have council be working with the building inspector to put together the other side.
Please be careful about and clear about the calculation of the size of the house versus the size of the lot. There's two different numbers in here, and when your calculation is coming to like 17.99 or something, clearly the number in the calculation is being driven by the 18%, and it should be driven by the design of the house. So I'd like to see the plan of the house so that we're really clear. Yeah, so that we're very clear on what the
Yeah,
footprint of this house is and what the whole calculation is.
Right, and I think it's like 17.6 or something.
No, it's, you have a calculation on your drawing that tells me that it's 4,069 square feet. In your letter, in your memorandum, you're saying that it's 4,100 and, where is it? 4,190 square feet. So you have two different numbers here. And again, you got to forgive us for thinking that when it comes out to like just that much below 18, the number on the paper is driven by the calculation and probably not by the actual drawings of the house. And I'd like to see the footprint of the house and the
We'll make sure
calculation.
we've got that right. I know what caused that because we did tighten the house up. And I probably had already submitted that, so I didn't go back and change. Ask everybody to give me back the copies that you get and cross it out and write it down. So I'll make sure we have that revised properly.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll see you next time. Will you be ready next time?
Of course.
Okay, and again, we apologize for
I
the
realize that it's not-
screw-ups on the noticing
I
side.
can go to say there's probably confusion because we put two applications in simultaneously. One for planning board, one for zoning board. They did the notice for one, they didn't realize they had the notice for the other. Happens.
Thank you for your time tonight.
Okay, sure, okay.
I'm gonna take my laptop.
Okay. And the next item on our agenda, if I can find it. Are we 25 Osceola? Yep. Is 25 Osceola. And this is per Village Code 300-42, fences and walls shall not exceed a height of 6 feet in side or rear yards. The proposed wall is 11 feet at the rear yard, thus requiring a variance of 5 feet for the height of the wall. Who will be heard on this application?
Good evening, Paul Vitretti, civil engineer for Julie and Michael Savali, 25 Osceola. And the landscape architect, Dan Sherman, is with me to help me get through the application. So this is the overall site plan. There. So what I've designed is a retaining wall system. Okay? And a retaining wall system has, the reason behind this, okay, it's a very steep slope piece of property. Okay? The natural grade over here, the worked grade in the backyard is 27%. And we're trying to level this area, and we're gonna try and level this area, okay, and this is 20%, so it's pretty steep. And the grade is not uniform. This wall has two wall systems, okay, which is what we call wall number 2, which is the upper wall, which is the higher tier. Okay? And this is the lower. So this is a tier, it's a tiered wall system over here, and this is a single wall system over here. There's there's a very big gouge in the ground here. Topography runs this way and that way, and this drops about 10 feet right there. And it's kind of an unsafe set of circumstances. So the rear yard is very hard to deal with, to play in, and so we're here to seek a variance, okay? And again, it's a wall system. So let me go through the heights of the wall. I'll try and do it here, and then I'll go to another drawing, which is for detail, okay? So the wall starts here, and it's 0 height here, okay? This is elevation 200, okay, to put you in a place, okay, that you could kind of understand what I'm talking about, okay? So this wall is at elevation 200. Over here, 0 height, because it meets the 200. And then as it turns this corner, right opposite this tree, the wall is 9 feet high. So it's not a uniform height wall.
9 feet high, you say?
Yeah, 933. Okay. And then it's opposite a tree. And then it starts climbing, okay, this way, and it goes up grade. This grade comes up. So this, by the time you get here, the wall is 5 feet high, right? So then, now this is the lower tier, okay? And this lower tier starts going from 5, okay, to where this wall is, as stated in the application, 11, slightly less than 11. And then again, the grade keeps changing. So again, this wall is not a uniform height. By the time it gets over to here, it's 6 foot 10 inches, 7 foot. And then as it returns this way, okay, it goes to 0. So the difference in the height between the two tiers is 6 feet, okay? Difference between the tiers, okay, this area, 6 foot 8. I made it rather wide, so I could put a lot of landscaping in here. And I made this even wider, okay, because we wanted to get more landscaping. The third wall, okay, is a wall to access down this low area. And the reason behind that is to try and put some gardens in there. That's where the hollow is. That's where it's gouged out, okay? And this wall never exceeds 6 foot in height. So if we can go to the next drawing, and this is, larger, easy to read. Again, I might be repeating myself. Starts at 0. There's a tree over here. It's 9 feet high. And then it goes and climbs. It's 5 feet high. And then this is, and it continues this way. That's wall 2. This is elevation, top of wall, 200. This is the lower tier, and that's where the maximum height occurs.
Right, it's 11 feet at that corner. What is the upper tier corner height?
The upper tier?
Yes.
It's 200.
No, the height of the wall.
Oh, the height of the wall? Oh, it doesn't exceed 6 feet.
Okay.
Above the lower tier, though.
Above the
So
lower
it's
tier.
11 feet, and then it's a flat area, and then it's another 5 feet above that?
The difference between the lower tier height of the wall and upper is 6 feet.
Upper one is 6 feet. Okay, this says 5, but okay, I'll trust you at 6.
So there are some attributes to this besides giving them a nice level part. Okay, stormwater runoff, Northbrook is there. This water just runs off, 27%, 20% grade. I've designed stormwater management into the application. And so when you do this, these flat areas, okay, actually do those statements. You actually say, tucked in the back of the code. But the reality is 27%, okay, poof, water goes right up and hits that. So this is going to reduce the runoff, okay, from this area by 90%. Also with the application, which we go to the planning board, okay, The driveway is presently gravel, okay? We're gonna pave it, okay? And we're gonna put a stormwater management system in, okay? Take all the water from there and the roof leaders from the house, which basically run to the ground right now, downhill. Landscaping,
And they will go uphill of the wall in the back?
okay, so, say again?
You said the drain, the water from the driveway and the leaders and gutters on the house. You're putting a dry well in,
Yeah, it's a very large system, it's not.
and it's inside the wall?
That's right. It's inside the wall. So these walls, when they're built, okay, the fill that you use it is a select brand fill. It's high strength fill, okay, and I have two.
Paul, could you speak into the mic?
Yeah, I have, not on this drawing, but there are two large pipes in here, okay, that have been sized to take the driveway. Right now, there's a couple little drainage inlets in here. I don't know where they go, okay? There's three of them. So I'm going to put a drainage system across here, new catch basins, okay? I could probably go back to the other drawing, I could show you. Put new catch basins in here, collect all that water. Water's gonna go here, I'm gonna take the roof leaders from there, okay? And I'm gonna put them in this system. Could you go back to the original? There's the stormwater system, okay? Right there. All right. So there'll be, but there's a lot of runoff here right now. This goes downhill.
Right.
We're gonna eliminate that. So that's one of the attributes of the design.
All of this fill, to fill in all this is all coming from offsite, I gather.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's, yeah, it's gonna be very, this is a wall system that requires very good fill, very good control and compaction. I've built some in the village before. So maybe the landscape architect can talk about it. And why don't we go to the third? Okay. So this is the 3D view, okay? This is where it's 0. This is where it's 9. Gradually climbs up to 5, okay? This is that corner that's 11, okay? Then it goes to 7, okay? And you asked me before, what's the height difference between this tier and that tier? 6 feet. So that kind of makes it, and then there's going to be a walkway down here, and there's a retaining wall, okay, which doesn't exceed 6 feet, okay, to hold up. There's a walkway. They want to put a garden down here. This picture shows you some of the roughness of the site. That hole right there is that. So that's basically the application. Maybe you'd like to hear from the landscape architect?
Yes, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
And I would, I think we really need to concentrate on the landscaping that is to the neighbor on the left of the house as you're facing it.
Yes.
Hello, Dan Sherman, landscape architect. We've created some 3D views with the SketchUp program to show the intended look at the beginning, not at full growth, but at the beginning of the project. And we show screening between the terraces of a spreading juniper. The computer makes it look like little puffs, but they would sprawl out to mostly conceal the 6 feet. In time, they would conceal the 6 feet. And below, we've put arborvitaes and dragon lady hollies, things we've found to be deer resistant. And then I really love this little gully that he calls a gouged out space pit. We like that. It's going to become the best part. We have a stone stair that will twist down in and some weeping trees, and it will be really a lovely little hollow garden, kind of like a secret garden. And that will have spreading ground covers and perennials and spireas and junipers and things in there. To answer your specific question, the view from the south, I don't think this view has caught up with it yet, but since we spoke, Mr. Savali spoke with the neighbors, we've added to the planting plan to propose some Norway spruce and some green giant arborvitaes to come up along that side, that southern side. Above, it's going to be very neat and formal looking with a lawn and a hedge that I feel supports the look of the house. It's symmetrical to the house to and it's a nice courtyard kind of lawn feeling up above. The other lawn is just a lawn. I've put a split rail fence around it so it looks more natural, and it has a view out into the woods and down to where the creek is. I can answer any questions.
Why, maybe cost is not a factor here, but why not pursue a cut and fill type of approach where you come out of the house, you have a flat area, and then you step down a little bit, which allows you to cut and fill and reduce the height of these walls substantially?
Paul, you may want to come
Is
back,
it-
but we did come down a little.
I mean, it's a huge amount of fill. I mean,
But it helps.
There's very little that you can capture by doing that.
Well, I was there. I just kind of feel like
We go down about 3 feet first.
if you're lowering the level of this terrace, it's just a lot less fill that's required. And if you're coming about from the house a little bit, it seems like cutting down. This is not a design review thing. This is more about just reducing the impact of what is a really substantial structure back there. Really substantial structure.
They do have it stepped down a couple of times here. See, you see the one here, John?
John, I was thinking the same thing that you just said, so I would be interested in hearing Paul's explanation.
So, let's go back to the other drawing. Okay.
Well, the ship will raise the water, you always have to consider both.
Yeah.
So, well, when you come out of the executive section. So when you come out, the patio, this is a patio, right? Flexible patio, it's at elevation 207, okay? Then it goes all the way down to 188 over here. And I'm trying to understand the question, okay? There's ledge rock here, okay? And, I didn't do any test pits here, but I put money on it, this ledge rock there. All these rock outcrops are here. It'd be very hard to cut that, okay? Very difficult. See, there's another aspect of building these kinds of retaining walls. These kind of retaining walls, this wall can't sit on top of this wall. It has to be set back. These difference in the height of the walls. So, and it's a wall system. And the whole idea is to carry the 200 all the way across. So you can have a flat area here and a flat area there. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I'm trying.
Let's see what it is about the steps. So we did slope down about 3 feet from there to get down.
Yeah.
It's because of the rock, you couldn't scrape it up.
There's definitely rock there.
And that's rock that maybe
Yeah.
Mr. Steinschneider can move. But Mr. Petretti cannot move that rock.
I'm sure removing the rock
How do
is
you move
costly.
anything?
I'm sure that removing the rock is costly. I think that building it up this big is just as costly. It's,
Yeah,
these,
I feel, there was a picture, I showed you the rock there and that.
I was looking at pictures that I just took a couple hours ago. I was there,
Yeah, that's-
walked all around.
It's real hard.
I think my question is, if you are not granted a variance, how would you do this? I mean, what would, because I think what we have to look at is, what is the benefit that can only be achieved by getting the variance? So in the absence of the variance, what would this look like?
Well, it's very steep, right? That's about the only answer. It's 27%. You're down at elevation 188 here, 187, and you're up at 200. So,
Right, but I think the question, Paul, is, Mr. Petretti, is you've got a 2-wall system.
yeah,
Couldn't you do a 3-wall system and not need a variance? Or 2 walls on the curved part and not need a variance?
well, I think the answer to that is very technical, and I hope that you can understand it. No,
I don't think so.
It is very difficult to build walls when the grade changes, okay? It's so easy to build a wall when it's flat, St. Kansas, put the wall up. So just dropping down, you drop down, then you come back up, okay? So what's the answer to that? In this one short section where this is, okay, this is right here, from here to here. If you cut this wall off and didn't do this, you'd have a 6-foot wall, okay? But, if you're here and you're going to spend this kind of money to do these kinds of walls, why, I'm asking for a variance so I can avoid that situation. You're going to momentarily see a 9-foot wall here. If you put a lot of vegetation in here, trees, okay, you're not going to see the wall anyway. Okay, so it's more practical to keep this configuration and put trees in. And then as you come this way, it climbs. Okay, can I do a 3-wall system here? Sure, I could. Okay, but
Hi, I'm Mike Somali, the owner, if I could address the question as well. We did look at that, obviously. I'm aware of the, the factors that you look at. When you try to design a 6-foot wall system, there's a combination, first from an aesthetics perspective, and I've spent a considerable amount of time talking with the country club about it. It doesn't look right. Multiple tiers of, it's not something that I think looks aesthetic or the club, but also by doing it because of the grade, it creates really small pieces of flat land that doesn't really serve the objective that I'm trying to seek, which I have 4 kids under the age of 11, to have a playable part of the yard, because if you look at any of those lines, 6 lines together, you're never going to really get a substantial piece of flat land if you're limited to 6-foot walls. And on the side, Paul's correct, which is it's only 9.3 for a very short period of time. And frankly, what we're trying to do on the landscaping, and I've met with all the neighbors, and I'm happy to hear from Larry and Wendy about their views, and I'm going to always listen to their views. But the country club submitted a letter of support, as did the neighbor across from the pond. Both of them were obviously very happy about the runoff, but they saw the design. The stakes are in the ground. John, if you were there today, you saw the stakes there. We had renderings, shown them to everyone on the other side of Osceola, where you have, think about making the left onto Osceola. You've got 4 kids in the first house. They're supportive. I have 4 kids. You've got Craig with 4 kids. He's supportive. Valvano doesn't have any kids, but they're also supportive. My next door neighbor, who was created by a subdivision before I bought the property, you guys are very familiar with that subdivision. Frankly, I would not have chosen that subdivision, but, and by the way, you don't know this, but guess what? There's now going to be a pool in that subdivided lot right next to mine. No problem. I was in favor of their project. They're in favor of mine. They have 2 kids. So you've got 14 kids in that small area before you even get to Old Mountain Drive. The other thing I just want you to be aware of, Lockhart, maybe 3 years ago, put in arborvitaes all along the front of Osceola that when they were put in were, this high. We're taking those down. We're contributing them to the country club because it is a beautiful, classic house. And it is absurd that those arborvitaes are now 20 feet tall, completely blocks the view. And from our perspective, we've lived in the neighborhood for 6 years. We just bought this in September. We're taking those down, but as anyone can appreciate, the front area is not a place for kids to play. Cars come flying down Osceola, especially from the golf club or the country club, and there's drinking and those sorts of things. And what's happened, because we have all these kids in this neighborhood, they all go to the local schools. The kids are coming home after school, and this is going to be an area of substantial kids playing, and this is even before we've opened the pool, right? So this is going to be an area where safety is of utmost importance. At this time, my 5-year-old son we're not even comfortable with him going outside because he'll fall right off the cliff there. And we're trying to be sensitive to what neighbors' perspectives are. But I'd also like to point out, when I first moved into the house in September, I didn't even know that I had neighbors to the left and to the front because you can't see their house for 6 months out of the year when the trees are there, right? Understand that 6 months out of the year. For the other 6 months, we're being very sensitive with an extensive landscape plan such that on the left side, all you have to do is put a couple of trees in, and that 9-foot wall is never going to be seen by anyone. And the neighbor across from the pond, they're perfectly fine with the size of the wall, as is the country club. And don't worry, whatever happens here, I'm going to still take down those trees in the front.
Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard on this, Sarah? Or here? If you'd give us your name and address, thank you.
I'm Wendy Sibley. I live next door on the round side where the trees are, at 155 Sherman Avenue. Been here 30 years. Just freaky. Our feeling on this is we totally understand the desire to create some playable land, although the slope has been there since the cones and probably before the cones and the Lockharts. I mean, it's always been there. It was there when they bought the land. And we don't have an issue with a retaining wall that's of height that is permittable by code, 6 feet on the side yard. Totally seems reasonable. A wall of this height, which they're proposing, concerns us in 2 levels. One, it's forever. It's a wall. It's, you know, you can put trees up, and as we all know, trees can get blown down, things get eaten. They're not there forever. Walls are forever. It is 2 or 3 times my size. It is almost the size of a building. And on top, I assume a wall of that height would need some sort of fence work to prevent kids from falling off, so you have another few feet on top of that. It's a substantial structure. I just don't think it's appropriate. I don't want to, I understand the need for a wall, but not that height. I also think it's something that, you know, it's going to impact our property, how we view what we see, how we enjoy our property. And I think there's other ways to achieve this. They're achieving the same purpose by using terracing facing the second hole. So maybe they can do some terracing on the other side with these high walls, or at least just so that they're not 9 foot, 11 foot. It just seems like a very dramatic, permanent structure. And I'm hoping that there's an alternative that would allow them to have more play area, but would also not impact our property, our enjoyment of our property, some sort of fair outcome. And I think it is an optional thing for them. I'd like to help them, but I do feel, my husband and I, Larry, we feel pretty strongly that there might be a better solution than a 9 foot, 11 foot wall.
Sarah, is there anyone else in Zoom land? Could we go back and talk about that again? One of the dilemmas we have on our board, you know, is we're reluctant to grant variances when the same solution can be developed another way. And, you know, it seems to me that the way you've terraced one part of this to reduce the visible mass of the wall can be done on the curved portion as well. You know, I just don't understand why that's not the case.
I think the terrace portion still has, terrace portion at its highest point is higher than, I don't think the terracing alone solves the height of the wall. But also, if you go to the slide, one could change it, you could just draw a straight line and eliminate the curve, and the wall that they're both seeing is 6 feet. Again, I've had the pleasure of seeing how this board analyzes similar issues. This is a unique situation. Their house is 150 feet away from what we're talking about, and then I don't think that I have to protect their view of my sloped yard, right? And so I could easily put very large trees along that side, or I can put 6-foot, fences that you can't see through that yard without coming to the board. I don't think that they would like that, and frankly, I wouldn't like to do that, right? But it is very easy to make the 9-foot part of the wall not appear. And I would sign something that says that I'll always maintain those shrubs to make sure that that thing is not visible. Part of the problem with being a lawyer is I always resolve to, I'll sign a contract that says I'm going to do it. Concern is that a tree is going to fall down and not do it. But, and they can pick the trees that they want, but these are going to be substantial plantings in that portion of the wall. And we have evaluated the possibility of tiering. I think you could do it. I think that there's added expense, and I'm not sure that it actually eliminates the size of the wall that you have to do. It will push back the location of the wall. It will reduce the amount of space you have.
I mean, if you, I'm going to use the word momentary. But when you go through the market, it's small.
No, use it, don't just hold it.
Starts at 0, goes to 6. Demonstrate. As the wall turns, you're not going to see. It's going to be 9 feet from 10 feet. Oh, you put some large trees there. The sky's the wall. That's the reason for the terrace. They go to terraces, greater than 5 feet from the lake, and walls. The terrace is so very wide. It's easy to put trees in the terrace.
And if I were to tier it on the other side, I think I would, get closer to that. But,
There's a tree, very large tree. So I'd have to go in front of the tree. So it's so much easier just to put a lot of shrub. But at one 10-foot section,
Right, that tree is why you can't go down. Right, that's a big tree. Could I ask Mrs. Sibley, how would you feel about working something out with Mr. Savali in terms of vegetation, trees and whatnot, that he will sign and continue to maintain? Could you use the mic? Thank you.
I'd rather do something that the town, that was required as part of the process, creating an understanding of all the landscape that was part of clearance.
That would be more than acceptable. I think many times why our applicants to sort of make, there's a disrepair on the wall and part of the application or part of getting the permit. I would more than happy directly with them or with the board.
Yeah, the maintenance side is a little one-off.
But whatever that agreement is, if it's with you, I would certify compliance on your basis. If there's ever any damage to the trees that were blocking that wall, I wouldn't be replacing them with 1-foot tree and waiting for them to grow. I'd be with real sizable trees that is always blocked off. I'd make that commitment to whoever wants to receive that commitment.
Acacia wall, large wall on the house, brick, and acacia of ink.
Certainly.
holding it up. You know, I just don't want to feel like no one else will see. No one else will see. That's just a commercial building, giant wall above us. That's not.
I guess,
For the record, could you give us your name, sir? Thank you.
I guess I don't, maybe I haven't been in front of, for one. I guess what I don't understand, help us understand. Are we okay with a beautiful 11-foot wall? And not okay with 65 code may or may not be? I just don't know how you evaluate. I have no doubt, they have great taste, I'm sure. Buying that house in the first place, obviously, a lot of love and money and any of the houses. So, recently, great with people rehabilitating, renovating houses, investment. It's all. But I'm just trying to understand the decision-making process. So I'm certifying that the great landscape, 11-foot wall is acceptable, or I'm not sure exactly how.
In simplest terms, an 11-foot wall is a considerable variance.
Right.
And sometimes when we get a request for considerable variance, we try to mitigate the impact on neighbors. One way impacts get mitigated is by making that item that's causing the impact more attractive to neighbors. Maybe it has penetrations, so Lycos, or maybe it's a material that's not industrial. You know, maybe it's plantings. You know, what is it, what can you do if you accept as premise that the taller wall is essential in order to accomplish the objectives after you explored all the other ways of obtaining it? How do you make that attainment more palatable to the neighbor? So I don't actually recall seeing in here, but I might have missed it, what the material was that was going to be used for the wall. I don't know whether it's concrete block. I understand your point. If it's concrete block, it creates an impact, an appearance that may not be compatible with the neighborhood.
Is it right, it's this NISA, it's a concrete NISA stone?
No, it's not concrete. Segmented wall, but I think that we have to think before the planning board or the AHR design stuff and facial thing look like.
It's an interesting question you're raising. I understand your thinking is that the appropriate board to consider that would be the boards you just mentioned. But essentially, from where we sit, part of the way of mitigating the impact of the variance request is by having a use of a material that makes it more acceptable and compatible with the overall look of the area.
And so I just received some samples, and I told them when I met them, share that with them, they engage in the conversation, what it looks like, what my alternatives are, but I don't think that when I hear concrete wall, I don't think that's the kind of wall that is.
I'm only going off what's in the drawings that were submitted to us. It's a concrete block wall.
Yeah, Mr. Petroni, could you enlighten us a bit?
I can only go by what's actually in here. It's a Tensar Mesa wall. It's got a rough face. It's colored to make it look like stone, but it's concrete. And this type of thing in this type of neighborhood and this type of house would probably be justified to have it a stone wall.
First of all, it
Has no what?
has no footing, okay?
Mhm.
It's not, and it's not a concrete. Concrete walls, very difficult design here, boom, and, so, I designed a lot of these walls myself, and designed.
It has no footing,
Has no,
and it's built on the earth, on gravel, what?
yeah. Right.
Okay.
I built some at Livingston Avenue, and I had a variance. Second wall. Everybody's building.
I want to go back to the point.
Yeah.
And the point really is, you asked about enforcement. Mr. Sherman asked about enforcement. And the one way we have of enforcement that doesn't put a neighbor overseeing another neighbor is by having what is approved, written in the documents, and then we approve the variance as per the documents.
Right.
These documents don't touch upon the areas that we might want to talk about. They don't necessarily talk about the type of wall finish. They don't talk about necessarily all the plantings that the two parties could agree to that would make both parties happy. Maybe we, and I'm just speaking out loud here, excuse me if I'm
No, I
out of
think
turn.
I think I like where you're going.
Maybe we need you guys to meet amongst yourselves, agree on those issues, and modify the documents. One page. It could just be an add-on page, which talks about the material of the wall and the plantings in the areas that are under concern, so that we can come back next month with the two of you saying, we're in agreement. And then we give the variance based on those terms and conditions.
Bruce, I thought you were going to say we bounce it to the planning board.
Well,
Because.
that's fine too, Pete.
Because they could come back to us with the look of the wall
Yeah.
approved, the plantings approved, the neighbors happy,
Yeah.
and whether it's a 6-foot wall, an 11-foot wall,
Right.
or a 20-foot wall.
I'm happy either way.
If it's attractive and the neighbors like it, then we'd have something we could, we could approve.
It's,
Because it's something that has to look good.
yeah.
I appreciate the balancing act that you have to do, and certainly, we have to.
Yeah.
The question I have is, if you can't see something, how does it impact perspective? I know in this instance, you're trying to balance differing interests, right? I'd love to go to the planning board with the variance, and then they're gonna have their own comments architecturally. There's gonna be open hearings, and they're gonna hear neighbors' comments about those elements, right? But for now, I guess it's hard for me to understand. One can't see something, and how can it be basis for, that it is impacting a neighbor? You can't see it. I hear a lot about projects that you look at with, wall 6 feet away, and it's right next to my property. This is a different part of that, right? These properties are extremely separated. There's a wall across the street from the second hole that's 12 feet high and has zero vegetation in front of it. Right? I have no idea how that got there. It looks perfectly fine to me. It's also really, really far away. Right? So I guess in the balancing test that you do, I'm having a hard time understanding how that shakes out.
Well, you are. You're explaining it fine. I think it's the other side of a coin where you could be put through the test of putting up 2 walls because that is feasible as opposed to desirable.
We've looked at, because when we spoke to them, and again, I really appreciate the comments, right, and their perspective, that's why we involved them. And the comment we had, can you explore the 2 tiers? We explored the 2 tiers on the left side, it wasn't possible, because we didn't want to lose that big tree.
That big tree is important. Yeah.
And we would add more trees. So we did explore that and that was the only comment that we received. Now, and we look at potentially doing it. The place I don't want to go is, if I have a 6-foot wall system first, I'm not sure that I'm going to do it because economically, I don't think that I'm actually getting bang for the buck. But also, if it's 6 feet, and I don't need variances, like, there's an element of, I don't see part of this wall, but I have a very, very substantial gardening plan and planting plan around the wall because I'm sensitive about, as you know, Peter, I play a lot on the second hole. Right? I play a lot of golf. Right? I'm there. Neighbors on the other side, we've spoken about it. They got very comfortable with it. So if I have a 6-foot wall, if I were to even construct it, which I don't know if I would, I don't know why I would invest that much money in massive education on the other side. So me, I'm kind of trying to meet in the middle, and again, I'm happy to go to the planning board, AHRB. I'm gonna have to deal with their comments in the public hearing anyway. So then if I have to come back here with the variance, again, the project is being probably later discussed, sure. It's not something that planning board and AHRB can't have on themselves. With an agreement that I'm gonna maintain the vegetation such that the 10-foot area that's 9 feet is never gonna be visible. Thank you for allowing the opportunity.
I mean, I'll say, I'm not sure I'm convinced that this is a needed variance, you know, and I appreciate everything you've said, and a lot of thought's gone into it, and I can understand a desire to do it that way, but it's not like some applications that come before us where we can't get the beneficial use of our property if we don't get this variance. And it's not as strong a case as that. So I think, given that, you know, I think just for my own vote, and my vote might not make a difference on this, but I would, I would be more comfortable if you came back with something that includes specifics about materials and the other things that Bruce spoke about, that the neighbors agree with.
Others feel the same?
I feel the same as Jeremy. Yeah, I feel the same. I feel it's substantial for this, even for this neighborhood, even given the spacing between the houses and what have you. It's a substantial landscape structure. I think what makes this neighborhood actually really fantastic is that it is these large, majestic homes in a very natural rolling landscape. And a lot of pains, I think, are kept to keep that. Even just the way going up to the country club is like, you know, it's like you have to navigate it because the landscape's it's a force of nature. And I think when you start to cut and walls, and it's like little by little, you will start to hack away literally at the great part of this neighborhood, like what makes this neighborhood really fantastic. So I think there's some work needs to be done on it.
Agree. Yeah.
So am I gonna go to the planning board or the AHRB, or do I need to come back here first with those specifics?
Well, if we voted tonight, it wouldn't go in your favor. So I think you want to go to the planning board and, you know, have them look at it. And
Would it be fair to say to the planning board that with, you know, with an arrangement worked out with Wendy and Larry on issues that we talked about, and with the AHRB's agreement on, you know, the structure and the materials, that this is something where I expect with those agreements that the zoning board would grant the variance. I've seen too much what happens with Zero Mountain Drive, where it's a ping pong effect. So I just want to make sure that.
well, there is ping ponging going on, you know, for sure. I don't know where my compatriots would come out on that. I'm more lean the other way. I've been to the Sibleys. I've looked at the property from the Sibleys, and all you can see are the Sibley's trees. You know, but that doesn't mean it's not a potential issue. To me, I would think that a recommendation from the planning board with their you know, landscape architect being involved and that being approved, that would, to me, make it a slam dunk. I'm not sure how you guys would feel about that.
I think you gotta take John's comments seriously. I mean, it's not exactly a zoning issue, so we can't really, it gets a gray area for us, but it strikes at compatibility. And it's one of the zoning criteria. And there's a virtue, as John laid out very eloquently, of keeping the certain look of the area, of that part of Dobbs Ferry, which is the open, natural look. You know, I mean, that's how this area has been built, that's the nature of this area. And if you start building retaining walls everywhere and segmenting all the ground, it changes the character.
There's still a lot of natural slope beyond.
I'm just saying, we don't need to debate it here, it's not the forum for it, but just as you come back to us and after you talk to the boards that have more jurisdiction over this kind of issue, it's an important issue.
Not surprising that.
Yeah, you know, we don't have a lot of wall issues, but we've had them a couple of times up on Bel Air, you know, where Bel Air, the houses front on the street, and they back up to a street down below, which I think might be Magnolia. You know, and people have come to us, you know, asking for, I don't know, 16-foot wall. And, you know, we've had them terrace it, you know, because into something that was legal. You know,
It's a village effort. Your backyard is my view, my backyard is your view. It has to be collaborative. It has to be. It really has to be collaborative up in Riverview Manor because it's just so tight. But you all enjoy this remarkable landscape where you are. And when you start to build substantial structures in it and you do it and another one comes along, someone else says, well, you let him do it, I want to do it, and I want to do it. And that's the precedent we're trying to not set. And I think that's where, you know, you asked before, like, how do we make our decisions? We're guided by these five standards. And I think for me, it checks at least 2 of those boxes.
And I've seen you, obviously, I just hope we don't end up with a 6-foot wall system that no people like it. I don't think it's very important that it's a smart.
We hope.
so we will adjourn you to when you come back.
You're referring it to the planning board?
Yes.
I appreciate it.
Yes, but I will write them a note to talk about the fact that they're going to be doing some heavy lifting for us. Oh.
I was gonna run after it,
Kristen?
Yeah.
Well, give it to Dan.
You might want to trash.
Say it again?
This is the lawyer for.
Kristen, what's her name?
Stewart.
I'll get it to you. I'll review it.
Good night. Good night.
Am I allowed to review that first?
You're right.
This could be classified.
Right?
Yes.
Character of that backyard.
Abrupt.
I remember when the Cones lived there, because my kids were in the same grade as the Cones kids at the house.
The house
And
is spectacular.
It's a spectacular house, spectacular ground. If you start carving up the grounds,
Yeah.
I'm not your guy. I think someone else can. I think you just. I believe you plug in. I don't really know. Give it a shot, is what I say. See what happens.
Oh, here we go. Just for, this is 197 Clinton Avenue, and this is to install an in-ground pool, masonry decking, drainage improvements, plating and fencing at the property located at 197 Clinton Avenue. And the required maximum impervious coverage is 40%. The proposed is 46, and so it's a 6% variance that we're talking about. Who will be heard in this application?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm Robert Schweitzer, landscape architect and applicant. Property owners. Lee? You know? Lee? I'm 97 Clinton Ave.
Yeah.
So you don't need me to read the variance, you've just stated it?
Yep.
Chairman? Okay, then let's get started. This is the site here. Denton Avenue is over here, the driveway, the pool is going to be the back here. Okay, right over here. First of all, I'd like to say that my client has reached out to some of the neighbors, and he has a letter of support, and he has also been in conversation with a couple of the neighbors, and they have supported this. But we don't have any, did you want to show, want to mention?
I have a letter, and I'm happy to hear number four. That's
Which neighbors do you have them from?
I have from a family engineer in Nelson Shaw, but we share a fence in the back. There are just directly behind us, but you would see us as floors and his property.
Right.
Okay, so let's go on to L1 site plan, please. Okay, this is the road here. This is we penetrate the site over here on the side yard. This is the pool. There's some decking around it. Garden wall, which actually acts as a retaining structure, not a high retaining structure. There's only a couple of feet of grade that's being held back. Our stormwater is gathered. There's a swale that brings water around to the pool on this side. There's a catch basin that drives the water through a curtain drain here because the deck also pitches towards this. This runs out to a pretreatment, and then there's a Coltech chamber here. There'll be an overflow out here. This is where all the water drains naturally. The system was sized by a civil engineer, and it's been sized to meet the town engineering code. Obviously, when we're done with you, we're going to go forward with engineering and building, and they will make a review this, but Tony has researched.
When I looked at the site, looking at the property line at the top.
This property line?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. This property seems to tilt slightly toward the neighbor's property. Are you going to regrade that a little bit to make sure that runoff doesn't occur?
Well, the property, the grade will run perpendicular to the property lines. So the property lines are running this way, so the grade is running like this.
Right.
Okay. So the stormwater, as I said, is what we've done here is that we've sized this system because it's not a big structure, and we've had excellent percolation too. The soils were sand loam, and we had the depth. So my point is that this will meet the design storm, so there will not be overflow. If there's an excess storm, then the water will come out this way, okay? But this is where all the water is running anyway.
Right.
This is your overflow here.
Have you ever had overflow into the neighbor's property? Okay, because it looks like they've got a real nice playground set and whatnot for the kids there. I just thought that you're going to have equipment in to put in the pool, and I'm just thinking to grade it a little bit so that it runs less toward the neighbor and more toward your drainage pool.
Well, as I said, if you look at, Chair, if you look at the drainage plan, water is coming this way. It is then intercepted with a swale, which brings water around this way to a drain. Here, it just comes out on this side, comes out and follows the path that it normally would. Water from the decking also comes into a curtain drain here that's contained by the wall. It's a gravel drain, and that is all routed into the infiltration system. Overflow, this should overflow, then it will come out at this point into a dissipation apron, and this is where the water runs anyway. But we're not changing where the course of water would not normally go. Is that clear?
Yeah, but I'm just thinking normally it would be running towards your neighbor's property. And if you could prevent that, I would think that would be a good thing.
Mr.
So,
Chairman?
Am I nutty? That's,
Our consulting engineer will also look at this. This will be going to planning, and all their water that will be
Oh.
retained on their site also. He will make sure of
okay,
it.
thank you.
Okay, so that's good for the drainage. You see the structure itself. Let's go to L2. Here it is. A lot of this stuff will be layered off, and you'll see more of the design itself. That's perfect. Okay. So this is what we have. It's a very small deck, as you can see. They have a patio here, which will serve for a lot of the sitting area. There is a small sitting area over here, and this again is your planting area, which is going to have the drain. So that's your catch basin here. You don't obviously see the infiltration unit over here. It has a reel on it, so it will cover up. And there's a walk on this side, and that's it. I mean, it's a very simple proposal. There's a garden wall here, which from grade here at the patio level will be elevated 2 feet. All right? Because things slope down over on the back of the wall, the highest point on the back of the wall, I think, is 3.5 feet. But then it pitches up to about 2 feet on each side. And that's just, we're working with the lay of the land here. That's the way it wants to be. It's a very simple proposal. There's nothing more to it. We have fencing. There will be privacy fencing that's going to go completely. There's existing fencing over here, which is privacy fencing. There's existing fencing over here. There's going to be privacy fencing that's added, 6-foot privacy fencing that's added over here, and then come around to a biparting gate. So this is all pretty well screened. We do have, if we go to the planting plan, I've massed in some plantings in this area, some heavier shrubs to fill in. Thank you. And you can see this brush line here, these are all trees. These are underplanted with hydrangeas and some viburnums, some larger hollies. And they will mass together. These shrubs get to be about 6 feet tall. And that's the goal, is to just really contain all of this with high shrubbery. Again, the wall is behind that, but that's just a second layer. There's some ornamental plantings around the pool, just to make that more appealing. There's an existing step that comes down into this patio here. There's 2 small lamps over here, and they are going to meet the, I did receive some feedback from the building department on that, and we are going to comply with what they request. That's it. Like I said, it's a simple thing.
I just have one thing to remind you of this. I think I may have said.
Oh,
sorry.
And
Yeah,
give your name.
Massimo Buckley. Thank you. I think I may have mentioned Testator. I don't think, my wife may have, I not just for react. Everyone else.
They actually asked me about it, and I think they're comfortable. And there are other houses in nearby that have pools, similar arrangement. Any questions here? Sarah, anybody have questions in Zoom land? No. Okay.
I do think you should, if you have letters, you should make them part of the record.
Can I add them post meeting, or I have one letter here from Ben Alley printed forward. Okay.
Yeah. At your own risk, sir.
No one's ever done it before.
Okay. That's from that Schulte.
These the ones that back up to you?
Yeah, they back up. Other than the test stores who were friends of apartments and everyone else who was kind of in that neighborhood for us, everyone kind of figured they're on the same backdrop. That's, at least in our conversations, and I asked Ben, just for texting if they have, oh my gosh, particularly because, I share that.
So motion to close the hearing?
Second? All in favor?
Motion to approve the variance legalizing permissible impervious surface coverage, this lot of 6,304 feet, as per the drawings submitted as part of this document.
Second. All in favor? Good luck to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Board.
Certainly welcome. So did you enjoy the entertainment to start with?
I mean, I was getting more nervous as it went on. There's no way. Lucky if they don't lose the hot tub.
Hot tub!
Next time you'll insist on being at the top of the agenda.
Oh, on the other hand, maybe you tired us out.
No, I'm more interested. Matt, one question. Sure. For the next steps, there are 2 other meetings. Do we attend those? Is this it?
Your next step is going to be the planning board. You'll make the application to the planning board.
And we show up then?
Yes, when you get put on the agenda. Did you submit for the planning board already?
We submitted for, I think we submitted for all 3. We checked, when we sent the certified mail, we checked for all 3. I think I told Sarah I put 6 more.
Okay, I just need the right amount of drawings. I believe it's 4 sets of drawing for the planning board, but,
We submitted those.
okay, well, then you'll be on the next planning board meeting. I'll have Sarah email you tomorrow if there's anything missing.
Yeah, I'll check.
All right.
Thank you very much.
You want another set?
No.
I think you need to close the meeting.